Okay, we will begin. Good morning and thank you everyone for joining us for our fourth Training Tuesday. My name is Natasha Bothan and I am with the Employee and Organizational Development Division with BHR. We're excited to have you join us today and invite you to join us for every Training Tuesday, which are held every third Tuesday of each month. For today's session, we ask that you please disable your cameras and kindly put your microphones on mute. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and Becky will reply to them at the end of the presentation. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And to get a jump start on this, we have asked Becky Fein from the Active Minds organization to come and speak to us today on mental health awareness. Please welcome Becky Fein.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you. Thanks for having me. Let me really quickly spotlight so we can get a little bit bigger screen. All right, so I'm here today to talk about mental health in the workplace, supporting and cultivating a supportive workplace, and just noting that, like Natasha said, this is a really important time, both because May is Mental Health Month, and because these are particularly stressful times. It's critical that we talk about mental health all the time. But right now, I think more than ever, we're in need of these conversations. So hopefully, this session will be helpful in building up conversation in your workplace. A quick note at the top here that this is intended for educational, motivational purposes. We're not offering psychological or medical advice of any kind, and this is definitely not intended to be a replacement for services from trained professionals. So we'll get more to the techniques and tools towards the end, but do want to offer a disclaimer at the top that this is not intended to be a substitution for psychological support. Okay, so for folks who haven't heard of us, Active Minds is the leading nonprofit in the United States supporting mental health promotion and education for young adults. We are powered by a network at more than 800 schools, workplaces, and communities, and through a widespread social audience. So we, as an organization, started up back in 2003. And it was founded by our current executive director and founder. Her name is Allison Malman. What happened was she was 19 years old when she lost her only brother to suicide. She was a college student at the time, and she was studying psychology, and she was just shocked that she had never really heard the discussion of suicide before. She hadn't heard that talked about. And so in addition to the tragedy and the loss that she was experiencing at that time, she just was feeling very, very alone and didn't know where to turn or how to talk about this. So she shifted all of her gears towards changing the conversation about mental health among young adults. At the time, we started on college campuses, but what happened was, here we are 17 years later, we're saying, okay, those young adults who were working so hard to change the conversation about mental health on their college campuses are now a huge portion of the workforce. And so we, Active Minds, have expanded to meet people where they are at. So that's in their communities, that's on college campuses, high school campuses, in workplaces, yep. So we're just really proud to be all over the place with this message, working to inspire mental health advocates to prevent suicide and save lives. So just to kind of frame the conversation that we're heading into right now, these are just such unprecedented times. We're experiencing something as a global community right now that we never have before, through the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's just again. This is true all the time, anytime. But right now, I just want to kind of start by saying sadness, frustration, confusion, grief, all of that's okay. And it's valid and it's important. Whatever it is that you're experiencing through this time, it's okay and it's valid. And I want to also mention that finding comfort and safety and support, that's okay too. We're hearing a lot of, I've heard through the pandemic, people express a sense of guilt for feeling some comfort or some security in being at home and having a safe home and feeling guilty for that, and so I just want to really support everybody in acknowledging that, and shifting that guilt into a sense of gratitude. I find using myself as an example. I'll have moments sometimes in the pandemic, where it just I feel really, um, I get a pause and say, okay, well, here I have a safe home. I've got a secure job. My family's been relatively protected from the virus, and that's wonderful. But also, there's so many people for whom that's not the story, and so many people who are struggling right now. And so instead of guilt, I try to aim for a sense of gratitude. I'm grateful for these things in my world, so then I can shift towards mobilizing and supporting people in finding those realities for themselves as well. So just whatever it is that you're going through, just noting that you're not alone. It's real, and it's valid. You're not alone. So when we talk about mental health, it's so important that we're talking about it as something that we all have. With mental health, it can be easy to think about it, and I think this is part of the stigma around mental health. Is it's an other person's, it's an other kind of person's situation or deal. It's an issue that other people deal with, rather than we all have mental health, and it's as important as our physical health. We all have physical health, and like our physical health, sometimes our mental health is doing great, and it's healthy, and we're feeling good and okay. And sometimes, like our physical health, we may be struggling or ailing, or working through something challenging. And so when mental health exists on a spectrum, everything from occasional sadness, I'm feeling down or I'm feeling stressed today, all the way to, same as as physical health. I'm not feeling great today. I maybe have a cold or something, all the way to potentially diagnosable chronic illnesses or challenges, struggles. So that can be, on the mental health side, things like chronic depression or anxiety as the two most common mental health challenges that we see. So when we can be talking about mental health in a holistic way, something that we all experience and we all have, we can be more open about it. We can talk about it, and express what we need in that way. So let's talk a bit about what can impact our overall productivity and well-being. What can impact the way that we show up at work and the way that we're showing up for our colleagues. One, circumstances, things that happen in our lives. So, examples, my car was broken into last night. I'm feeling stressed about that. Or my grandma has fallen ill, and that's, really hitting me today. Or my kid kept me awake all night, and, I'm just really tired today. Or just generally extraordinary events, things that happen in our lives that are challenging and can impact the way that we're showing up to work. Diagnoses, conditions that we live with, that can be physical or mental health. We know that will impact our mental well-being. It will impact the way that we're feeling, in the way that we are physically and mentally able to show up in the workplace. Trauma, that's stuff that's happened to us in our past or presence. That can be violence, that can be childhood trauma, divorce or loss, anything that's happened that it's a piece of us. It's a part of who we are. It's a part of how we show up. And as with everything, it's going, how we manage that, how we address that, how we process that is going to impact the way that we show up as colleagues, as managers, as teammates, whatever your role may entail. And then lastly, our environment. That's our workplace, and culture. That could be things like institutionalized oppression that we live with, discrimination, stigma, positive or negative culture, relationships with peers, even our physical space, like literally, the space that we work in. Is it pleasant? Is it comfortable? Is it stimulating in such a way that's supportive of our productivity and motivation. All of that matters when we're talking about our productivity and our well-being and our mental health. And then, of course, over all of that is the COVID-19 pandemic. That is touching every facet of our lives, every in some way or another. And I know every location is managing it differently and seeing different things, but undeniably, there's nowhere that's not changed at least a little bit or impacted by this um, by by the pandemic that we're going through right now. So just want to acknowledge the all of those things that we show up with, that we bring to our workplace. So let's talk about self-care and support. So your worth is not measured by your productivity. I appreciate that, and I appreciate that graphic as a framework for this particular segment, because what is the what we do know, and studies support this, is that workplaces that support our mental well-being, and places where we feel supported and able to take care of ourselves, we're seeing employees stay longer. We're going to increase the sense of longevity, because there's a sense of being valued. We're going to see higher levels of productivity, because people feel fulfilled and able to do their job the way the way they're most able to. So let's talk a little bit about self-care and support. So first, like we've mentioned, expanding our idea of mental health. So that's going to, what we mean by that is looking at mental health in a more holistic way, and owning our part of it, whether or not we're somebody that lives with a diagnosable mental health challenge. We have mental health, and all of us experience that differently. Apologies if you can hear my background noise here. I promise we've got a little infant on the other side of the wall here, who's a little cranky about going down for a nap, but he'll get there soon. So expanding our idea of mental health. Proactively engaging with wellness practices and resources. So this is about understanding what's available to you, and engaging with those. So just kind of an acknowledgement and support, that acknowledgement that there are almost 300 people on the call right now. So already you all are proactively engaging with one of the things that your workplace offers, as far as your mental health and mental health promotion, and cultivating a workplace that's supportive of mental health. So speaking to an audience who seems like is already working to be in tune with what's offered and what's available, but continue that, working on finding out what's available to you, and engaging with it. And one thing I'll say for the folks in the room that manage teams, it's so powerful and important that as leaders, we're demonstrating our own mental health and our own self-care. For example, I read a story a little while ago of a man who was being celebrated in his retirement. It was a big article in the newspaper, and it said, this person retiring after 55 years at this one job, and the headline was "Never took a day off." And I sat there, I really thought about it for a second. I'm starting to engage with this mental health at work content, and I thought about it and said, realized that there are a lot of things that person should be celebrated for and honored. 55 years at a workplace is an achievement, and that's valuable and important. But the fact that he didn't take a single day off work, that's not the part that should be celebrated or uplifted, right? We should be taking the time off that we're allotted. It won't make us better workers to not take that time. And so modeling that as a leader is really, really powerful. Sends a message to the team that you manage, that it's okay and it's important to take that time off to rejuvenate and take care of ourselves. So modeling positive language, messaging, and behavior. Certainly that what I just mentioned is part of modeling positive behavior, but modeling positive language, I want to pause on that for a second because I think this is a really important part of our mental health conversation. So um, I'm curious, for folks in the room, if you've ever heard, think about a time that maybe you've heard somebody use mental health in a potentially negative way, or even derogatory, using it as an adjective. So an example might be, this weather is so bipolar right now, or I'm really OCD about keeping my house clean. Um, so those kinds of examples I think are so important to acknowledge and remove from our language as best as possible. And the reason for that is, if I say something like the weather is so bipolar, one, it's obviously inaccurate from a diagnosis standpoint. That's not what being bipolar looks like. What we mean when we say something like the weather's so bipolar probably is that it's unpredictable, or it's unreliable, or it's in general it's a negative connotation on the weather. So if I'm somebody who lives with bipolar and I hear somebody say something like the weather's so bipolar, it's an incredibly diminishing expression, right? And I'm likely to be further silenced by that. So I invite everybody. My background is in public health. I have studied. I have a master's degree in public health, and in that space, we really emphasize um, that the way that we talk about an issue is how we subconsciously think about that issue. So it really is so valuable that we're taking a pause and thinking about the way that we talk about mental health. And to go a step further, we use words like insane or crazy kind of as a catch-all, right? Like, oh, that person's acting insane, or I have this insane project that I need to work on, all this. And it's interesting, when I kind of took notice of that and worked to actively remove that from my language in that way, I found that I actually really expanded my vocabulary, right? Because if I say something like, "God, this project that I'm working on is insane," what do I actually mean by that? Like, it could be any number of things, right? It could be it's unbelievable, it's wild, it's ridiculous, it's amazing, it's impressive, it's so I started to be really a lot more specific with the words that I was using, and more descriptive with what I was talking about. So the last one I'm going to leave you with on the positive language is at Active Minds and in the mental health sphere, you'll hear us talk about suicide as somebody having died by suicide, as opposed to somebody having committed suicide. And so that's a subtle, but I think very profound shift in the way that we talk about suicide, because we're moving it away from the world of crimes, right? When you talk about somebody having committed suicide, it's connecting it with a crime. Somebody committed a crime. When we talk about it as somebody having lost somebody to suicide, or somebody died by suicide, then we're moving it into the sphere of public health, something that we can speak about, speak openly about, and prevent and treat, because that's the reality of it. That's what we're talking about in the realm of suicide. We know that if we can talk openly about suicide, and if people are asked openly about their intention and what they're going through, we can lower the rates of suicide, and we can shift people away from the idea of suicide. Noting that if you ask somebody about whether they're considering suicide, it is not planting an idea that wasn't there. It's not something that will encourage someone to do that if they hadn't already been considering. And indeed, it will support them in feeling seen and heard, and shift the way that they're thinking about, and could potentially prevent them from taking a self-harm step in that way. So I think that's really important. And then showing up for ourselves, and those around us in safe and healthy ways. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that with the VAR method in a second. So as we shift into VAR, validate, appreciate, refer, I want to just kind of frame that by saying we all deserve to be heard and validated. So what that looks like is offering a listening ear to those around you. And asking for a listening ear when we need it. So in the workplace, I worked with a team a couple months ago who mentioned, and I loved this. They talked about how they have random acts of showing up. They said so they would just pop into to if you have a chat forum, or if you have maybe it's in your email, just popping in and like, hey, how's it going? In the world, if you're in an office, if you're in cubicles, whatever the case may be, it's kind of the equivalent of peeking over somebody's cubicle wall and like, hey, how's it going? Are you doing okay? Just finding out how we're all doing from a in a kind of holistic way. It's not only about the work that we're doing, it's also about who we are as humans, as people who are experiencing our lives. They also the same team had flyby check-ins, which I thought was another kind of cute and catchy way to say that, just kind of flyby check-ins. And they see that at the beginning of meetings, perhaps, if we're having a team meeting or even a one-on-one check-in, just start with 2 or 3 minutes of like, how's it going? How are you? How are your kids? Whatever it might be happening for you, and just get to know each other a little bit more there. When we started the pandemic, and I'm going to tell you about VAR in a minute, but I want to let you know that when it was created, when we worked on this tool initially, it was really focused around offering a listening ear to those around you. So it was about being approached. If someone came up to me and said that I'm struggling or I'm feeling stressed, I would be able to respond to them with this tool. What became abundantly clear at the beginning of the pandemic is that the people wanted a tool for how to ask for a listening ear as well. So how do we ask for that when we need to be heard? So we're going to talk more about that as well. So I'm gonna invite everybody to actually engage with me a little bit. I know I'd love to be able to see everybody, but of course in a Zoom world that's not possible. So we're gonna use a tool called Mentimeter, and I'm gonna ask everybody to pull out their phones and go to menti.com. I'll show you a slide in a second. So, but just a note that more than ever, we need social connection, not distance. And the term in the COVID-19 world is that we need social distance from each other. And in the mental health world, we were very quick to amend that a little bit and say, yeah, physical distance is important for making sure that we're not spreading the disease. But social connection is critical. So socially connecting while remaining physically distant is what it's about. So I'm going to ask everybody to pull out their phones or on your computers, whatever you might be in front of right now. Go to menti.com and you'll be prompted to enter a code. And so use this code 26614516. And answer a question. When we think about mental health, conversations, what are some potential barriers we might have to having these conversations? What might come up from us? Why might it be challenging to talk about mental health? What comes up? So I'm actually going to share a different screen here so that we can see the answers coming in. All right, let me share the responses. All right. So we're seeing people show up, and I just really, really appreciate your engagement here. So feeling judged, feelings of shame, discomfort in sharing, not having the language to talk about. I'm seeing judgment several times show up here. Shame and embarrassment are showing up many times. Stigma around it. Embarrassing to admit that you're struggling. Worry about offending the person or having them view you differently. Yeah. Shame, guilt, fear, stigma. People might judge me, concerns of offending the other person. Other people might not value mental health or think it's real. Uh, Worry about being a trigger, pride, worry it's a sign of weakness, stigma against it, shame that you that can't take care of yourself. Society deems mental health as something bad to talk about. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so there's some very pervasive themes that are showing up in this. Finding the right words, fear of being seen as weak. Um, so yeah, I think it's so valuable and important. And keep the responses coming if you want to. I think it's so valuable and important to pause and think about what are the barriers that we have to these conversations, so that we can get it out in the open and look at a list like this and see that, we've got almost 200 people having responded to this question here, and the themes are very very consistent, isn't it? Preconceived ideas, fear that you're unstable, misunderstanding, judgment. So it's just such a resounding demonstration that you're not alone in feeling these things. These are very real barriers that people have when think about when they're thinking about this conversation. So what I do want to point out in as it relates to these barriers is that studies are demonstrating, interestingly, that by and large stigma around mental health is on a downward curve. It's heading downwards. When we break that out, interestingly, when we break that out by race and culture, the downward curve is happening at different speeds, because we do know that mental health is addressed differently in different communities, among different racial and ethnic lines, and that's important to address, because we need to be messaging around mental health as it relates to the individuals that we're serving. But overall, when you zoom out, the line is going down. And so what that means, and the way that they come up with these, the way that they know that, is that they're asking people, they say, would you think less of, I'm paraphrasing, but would you think less of somebody for seeking the help that they need if they're struggling? And the vast majority of people are saying, no, absolutely not. I would not think less of somebody for getting the help that they need. I hope that they get the help that they need. Then when we flip that same question around and we say, do you think that you might, do you think that you might be thought less of for seeking the support that you need if you were struggling? And we still see very high rates of people saying, yes, I'm afraid that I would be judged or I would be thought less of for seeking the support that I need if I'm struggling. So we've got an interesting conflict there, right? So 15 years ago, when Active Minds started, that number was very different. We did see very high rates of stigma. And so the messaging mental health advocates would be out there saying is stigma, we have to reduce the stigma. And interestingly now, the big message is actually stigma is quite low. Go get the help that you need. We're trying to work on counteracting the perceived stigma as opposed to the actual stigma, which is on its way down. The other reason why I think it's so important to address potential barriers is so that when we think about having these conversations with people around us, and those voices show up and say, like we saw in this list, if the voice shows up and says, I'm afraid I'm infringing on this person's privacy, or maybe I'm afraid to say anything about what I'm going through because I'm afraid I'll be perceived as weak. All of those things. I think it's so important to acknowledge that that's happening in our own minds and work to counteract that, because as this demonstrates, those barriers are they're real and they're ubiquitous. And so the more we can acknowledge them and move forward with them, the better and more deep our conversations are going to be. So I want you to hop back into the menti.com here and answer one more question. I want you all to think of a time that someone validated something you were going through, and how did it make you feel? Think of a time someone validated something you were going through. How did you feel about it? So this one's going to be a word cloud. It's going to people can enter a handful or enter words, and it'll show up in a word cloud here. So I'll let those stream in for a little while. Heard, relieved, and how it works is that as more people say that word actually gets bigger in the word cloud. So far we're seeing relieved as the biggest word, understood, empowered, heard, proud, respected, valued, seen, supported, validated, shocked, comforted, happy, joyful, not alone, relief, accepted, safe, grateful. So I love this word cloud because I just think it's, you see the four big words that are still on there right now is understood, relieved, supported, and heard, which I just think is so telling of what it is that we're doing with this. So keep those coming. I'd love this word cloud to continue building. And if anyone is interested, I'm happy to screenshot this and share it with you all, so that you can remember what it is that we're doing when we offer somebody the steps of validation, which we're about to go into. So when you think about those barriers, when you think about the reasons why you might not have these conversations, I want you to remember these words and know that when you're offering somebody validation for something that they're going through, these are the feelings that are coming up for them, and it's not about saying it perfectly. It's not about having the exact words, which we saw as a potential barrier. It's about showing somebody that you're there for them, and that you care about them. And this is the feeling that they're going to get from that. It's going to be valued, safe, confident, happy, not alone, appreciated, proud, comforted. I might be repeating myself, but so yeah, I'm going to switch back to the slides now. But thank you all for being engaged with the Mentimeter. I think that's such a powerful way to kind of see how many people are in the room and hear a little bit from your voices. So let me go ahead and reshare my slide here. Okay, so we're going to spend some time talking about VAR, which is Active Minds' everyday tool for everyday conversations, we call it. Validate, appreciate, refer. So VAR was actually created by young adults. They were an Active Minds chapter, and they were out. They were saying, we're Active Minds, we're an Active Minds, we're a mental health advocacy organization. And then they found people were coming up to them and saying, "Oh, thank goodness! I'm so glad to have found you. I'm feeling really stressed out. I'm feeling overwhelmed, and I'm not sure what to do about that." And these young people were they were not sure how to respond, and they didn't want to say the wrong thing. They didn't want to, they wanted to make sure that this person got the support that they needed. So they came up with this acronym, this validate, appreciate, refer. So I'm going to talk us through the steps here. But it's a powerful way to kind of quickly and effectively respond to somebody to make sure that they get what they need. And so that we're giving them these feelings that you all just shared about what it feels like to be validated. So first, we're going to validate their feelings and experiences. So what that looks like is, that sounds difficult. That makes sense. I'm sorry you're going through that. What you're going through is real and it's valid. That sounds really overwhelming. It's okay to be confused or frustrated or disappointed. So it's going to be all about finding the words that work for you. But that's what it's about. It's about starting with validating. Somebody says, "I'm really stressed out," or "I've got a big project," or "I've got a lot going on." Start by saying, "That sounds difficult," or "That makes sense." Like, yeah, it does seem like you've got a lot going on right now. So we're validating right there. Next, we're going to appreciate their courage and their honesty. So with this, we know that it can be challenging to speak up, like we saw in that in the slide there. It can be challenging to speak up. We know that there is sometimes it's loaded. Sometimes it comes with a lot of emotion or a lot of fear or concern that I'm being judged or someone's going to think less of me. So we want to appreciate that they spoke up. We want to let them know that speaking up was the right decision, even if it was a challenging one. So it can be hard to find the words with everything going on these days. Thanks for saying so. It really helps to know what you're going through. I appreciate that you shared. Staying open about our feelings will help us get through this. And so these are just some ways to express that you heard them, that you appreciate that they spoke up, and that they made the right call. So last, we're going to refer to skills and support. So Active Minds is very unique, I think, in the skills part. We oftentimes when you hear about refer, it's about referring somebody to professional support, which is absolutely important for some people. That's going to be a really valuable resource for some people. Is going to be the professional support that they need to get them through something. But for a lot of people, skills of self-care are going to be as self-care and social support is going to be what they need in that moment. So refer can sound like, what do you do for self-care? How does your balance between work and home feel right now? How does some fresh air sound? What would be most helpful to you in this moment? So you'll notice that in the refer section, everything is framed as a question, and that's really important because it's all about finding out what they need to get through this moment. So if you've ever heard the term motivational interviewing, this one's going to be it's rooted in supporting someone in figuring out and deciding what the right next step is for them. So we're going to ask them questions about that. What do you do for self-care? Or, one reason why this is so critical is that what works for me for self-care might be really different than what works for you in self-care. I had a colleague share a story with me recently where they had recently engaged with VAR, and so they had that kind of fresh on their mind, and they were talking to a buddy, and they said, what'd you do this weekend? And the friend was like, oh, it was so great. I played video games for 9 hours. I just spent the whole day playing video games. And his first instinct was like, oh my gosh, like video games for 9 hours, like you need to get outside, or that sounds unhealthy. But he stopped himself because he'd recently done VAR, so he just thought that. He didn't say it out loud. And he paused. He said, you know what? It really seems like 9 hours of video games was exactly what you needed for self-care right now. And that's great. You were engaging in something that works for you, and recognize that for him, getting outside or doing, getting some fresh air would be a more effective route to self-care. But what the most important thing is that we're addressing self-care in the way that's right for them. So that's why it's so important to ask rather than to try and project what I think might help you. Find out what you think might help you. So a couple things to avoid. Be sure to avoid when we're doing VAR. So first, we want to avoid trying to fix the issue or rush to a solution before we fully validated the experience. And so this is really important because it's possible to kind of inadvertently invalidate what somebody's going through. And I say this as kind of a note to you all, as well as a reminder to myself. I tend to be a very solution oriented person, and I feel very genuine that that's coming from a place of care, and that's coming from a place of wanting to support somebody in what they're going through. However, if I rush to fix something or rush to a solution before I validated what they're going through, it's possible that I'm going to overrun what it is that they're going through. So, for example, I manage a team of people. And if somebody comes to me and says, I'm really overwhelmed with this project right now, or I just have, 100 emails in my inbox that need responding, and I'm and I'm just kind of feeling swamped about it, and a little stuck. If I jump right into like, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to jump in there and I'm going to help you. It's coming from a place of wanting to help them achieve their goals and get what they need. But it might not be what they need right there. And in fact, if I jump in with a solution as their supervisor, it's possible that they're going to internalize that as me conveying that they haven't done enough, or maybe that they are doing something wrong. And another example is if say my partner comes home and says he's feeling really stressed about the day, and I say, okay, yeah, go for a run or something. I know that helps you. Instead of starting by saying like, wow, that sounds really difficult, or I'm sorry you're going through that. Then I might be overrunning something that he'd already thought about, and he just wanted to share with me that that's something he's going through. So it's so important that we're careful to let ourselves pause before trying to fix the issue, or rush to a solution before having validated the experience. And it might be that they want suggestions, or that they want that support from you, but first let's find out what it is that they need in this moment. We also want to avoid being critical or judgmental. We want to instead seek first to understand. For anyone who has read or engaged with Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you might recognize one of the habits here: seek first to understand. And that's so important, because whether it's like I mentioned, email inbox overwhelm, or it's chronic depression, whatever the case may be, I may not be able to personally relate with that. It's possible that I have 100 emails in my inbox too, but it's just not landing with me in a stressful way as it is the person I work with. That doesn't make it less valid that they're feeling overwhelmed by it. So it's really important that instead of being critical or judgmental, in that case, I can be like, well, just respond. Why is this a big deal? That's not going to help them in that moment, right? Because it's invalidating what it is that they're experiencing right there. I want to start by seeking to understand what it feels like to them, what they're going through, so that I'm not projecting my interpretation or my experience onto them with that. And with that in mind, using our own experiences to relate before hearing them out. So it's important with this one to note that our experiences are valid and deserve to be heard as well. But just in a different time, we want to take turns. And so so what that looks like, using our own experiences to relate before hearing them out, what that might look like is if my partner comes home and says that he's had a really stressful day, if I respond with, yeah, I mean, let me tell you about my day. I feel really, really stressed out too, or something, which is valid, right? That's important, and it deserves space. But if I start by kind of jumping on his, I feel really stressed out today, then I don't give him the chance to share the way that maybe he intended to right there. And instead I'm kind of jumping into it and taking it as my own. So again, this is something that might be used in just casual conversation. Like I might use my own experiences as a way to relate in an attempt to connect, right? Like, yeah, we're both really stressed out. But it might be closing down the conversation or taking over the conversation in a way that might not be helpful for them. In a professional setting, using our own experiences, same deal. If somebody comes to you and says you're feeling really stressed out, or they're really stressed out, we want to pause and validate their experiences before sharing our own in that moment. So lastly, we want to always avoid saying that it's not that bad. And so an example there is, if you ever find yourself starting a sentence with something like, well, at least this happened, or at least this didn't happen, we want to pause and kind of take a step back from that, because anytime we start a sentence with at least, that's inherently a diminishing statement, right? It's and I'll say it again. I feel like kind of a broken record, but I just want to validate everybody who has done it. It's coming from a place of wanting someone to feel better, right? It's wanting to support them in that moment, but it might be reducing what it is they're experiencing. So an example of that, at Active Minds, we work with a lot of students and young adults, and so last May, when the pandemic had first hit, we had a lot of 2020 graduates who were going to miss graduation in the way that they'd always dreamed, right? College graduation, and they dreamed about wearing the cap and gown and walking across the stage. And time after time, we were hearing from countless students that the message they were getting about graduation was, well, at least you're still graduating, at least you're still getting the degree. That's what's important, right? And they stopped and they kind of like, they said, yeah, well, of course. And I'm grateful that I'm getting the degree. And yes, that is what's important about my college education. But I've had this dream for a very long time that I would get to walk across the stage. Like I've always seen college graduation happen. And that's not happening for me. And so what they said time and time again is like, what they need right there is just to feel validated and say, just to start with like, yeah, that is just a huge bummer. Like it just really sucks that that's not what your graduation experience is going to look like. It's so unfortunate that that's not what that looks like. And and then I'd be like, yeah, thank you, and then go into like, well, I could say, well, at least I'm glad that I'm getting the degree, at least I'm glad that that's still happening, and that wasn't compromised for me, and that is relevant across the board. There's so much in this past year that people have had to sacrifice. There's so much loss, so much, and that's loss in every sense of the words. For some folks, it's experiences and opportunities, and for some folks, it's loved ones. So much loss has happened in throughout this pandemic, and so we want to be careful to not try and kind of divert that into like a silver lining or something like that. Not that that's not valuable. So I mentioned at the top that we VAR was kind of initially designed as a way to respond if somebody expresses that they're struggling. But we have really kind of shifted it also to how do you ask for that when you need that? And I think that's really, really valuable. So I get that question a lot. So I'll go ahead and just address it. Like how do I how do I let somebody know that what I need right now is validation and not necessarily advice, and not necessarily their experiences. I just kind of want to share. And so some words that you can use for that is like, is it okay? You can just ask, is it okay if I vent for a second? I just have something on my chest. I don't want to and I want to let that out. Is it okay if I share? I think a lot of times you're going to get a yes to that. And a lot of times, if you get a no, it's probably for a valid reason. Now's not a good time, but I would love to hear from you later. Thinking about it in a professional context, if we can ask for the things we need. If using my own team as an example, if somebody says, I have this project, it's really weighing on me right now, is it okay if I have an extra day for that? And I've got it under control. I don't need any extra support, but it would be really helpful if I could just take an extra day to finish it up. And so then that lets me validate, like, yeah, that sounds difficult, and absolutely you can have an extra day. I'm glad you shared, so that I'm not sitting here thinking like they're just missing a deadline. They're not showing up, but they approached me with it, and they have something going on, and that's really valid and important. So yeah, I think those are some important things to note. That's VAR in a nutshell. One thing that I really love about VAR is that it can happen. You can do your VAR steps in 10 seconds. For example, if someone says, I have so much going on right now. I'm really kind of struggling today. I can say, wow, that sounds really difficult. It makes sense. It sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. I'm really glad that you shared that with me, so I can, so I know what you're going through. What would be most helpful to you right now? How can I support you in getting what you need right now? Boom, you just saw me do my 3 VAR steps in 10 seconds. And it's possible that that would lead to a bigger conversation, but it doesn't have to. And I think that's the power of VAR, is that it allows us to be having these mental health conversations, these hard hitting, substantive conversations in a non-intimidating, non-confrontational kind of way. And it's normalizing mental health conversations, so that we can all be kind of in it together and supporting one another with that. So just a note where I have a, please send any questions in via the chat. I do want to address your questions, so just planting that seed now as I get close to the end of the slides, so that you can be thinking about your questions and sending them into the chat box here. So the most important thing to remember about VAR is that it's not about being an expert. It's just about being present. It's about being there. And I like to just pause and imagine what kind of what our workplaces, what our families, what our peer groups, what would they look like if we are showing up for each other and kind of letting ourselves deepen these conversations and reduce the barriers to having the conversation. And I'll tell you, it gets easier. It might feel kind of awkward to think about or difficult, but that muscle it's like a muscle, like our physical health, that when I exercise it, it gets stronger, and it becomes habit. It becomes instinct. And I'll say, even as somebody who's been in the mental health and public health sphere for over a decade, when I started working with VAR, it started showing up in every facet of my life. I use it. I use it with my partner and my kid. I use it with my the team that I manage. I use it with my parents. It's so powerful to deepen our conversations in this way. And so I really hope that that's something that that you all can take from this. So I'm seeing a couple questions come in, which is great. Keep them coming. And I want to acknowledge that our experiences in this, they're so unique, and they're universal. What I mentioned at the top, these are unprecedented times. I think in 10 years, everybody who's alive today is going to have some COVID-19 story. And there's something very bonding about that. I think about even my 9-month-old baby who was born right into the pandemic. He's going to grow up with a group of peers who were all born into a pandemic. And what does that mean? And what is that experience? So everybody who's alive in this has an experience. So it's universal, and it's so, so unique. Each person's experience is unique, and it's valid. So we're in this together, and more than ever, we need to show each other grace and support in what it is that we're experiencing. So I want to turn to our chat here and answer some questions that are coming in. Is there a time when validation is not the right thing to do? And I honestly don't think so. I'm racking my brain to see if there's an experience or a time when it wouldn't be. I would say if you're in communication with somebody who experiences very, very severe mental health challenges, there may come a time when validating, I'm thinking about kind of a very severe mental health episode, for example. We may not want to validate the things that they're saying if it's not rooted in reality, let's say, but we can validate that it is real for them. So I'm of the mindset that validation plays a role basically in all conversation. what should you do when you share some struggles in a professional environment and are not getting the response or support that we need? So that's a great question. If we are sharing something that we're going through, and it's not, if we're on a team where this isn't supported, if I'm really having a hard time with my work or showing up, or something's going on, and we're not getting the support response that we need. I mean, I think one thing that's powerful about having a conversation like this, as a full organization, is that you all now have, kind of as a full government entity, this language to use. I think that's one thing that's really powerful, is that we're kind of uplifting the conversation across the board. So hopefully, this serves as a tool that you can use to refer back to and to support that in our teams. And I'll say, if you're really not getting the support that you need from your leadership, it might be something to take to HR, and to take to somewhere that is a safe place, that you can say, hey, I'm going through some stuff, and I'm in need of reasonable accommodations, and that's allowed. That's something that you are entitled to, and you should be able to receive. So hopefully that is something that you're getting one way or another. I'll say that for people who do lead teams, it can be challenging. It can be overwhelming to think about how to support our teams in this way. So I hope that this was helpful, and there are ways to engage further as a management team to support how we can show up for and create cultures in which our teams are feeling supported, and getting the responses that they need for this. I'm gonna
And Becky,
go
can
ahead
I
and
just jump in real
yeah,
quick?
please.
This is Natasha with BHR. Would like to remind everybody also about our EAP, and make sure that if you are feeling overwhelmed and would like to speak to somebody, you can go out, and every employee is offered 5 free sessions with a trained counselor professional. So please go out. If you're unsure where to go to the BHR website under employees, and you will be able to find it. And so there are services out there as well to help get you started if you are looking for that.
Yes. Thank you, Natasha. Yeah, very important to know what's available, and what your resources are from the workplace. And so you've got it sounds like, robust employee assistance program to know about. I'm just going to skim through some more of these questions. So I'm seeing a couple questions. So if you know someone who struggles with reality, do you quote play along, or tell them what they are perceiving isn't reality? So I'll say I'm not a trained psychologist in that way, but my response to that would be just to really support them in getting the professional support that they need in that case. I think it's very specific to kind of how or who you might be working with. I think playing along quote is contextual. It really depends on the situation. But more importantly, I would use VAR to try and make sure that they're getting the professional support, and the professional support that they need to address their mental health there. How do you ask for understanding if they're coming from different levels of understanding? I don't think I understand that question. If the person who typed it wants to try again. Can there be an appropriate way to approach a person you don't know but see and sense is struggling? For example, a neighbor. I think that's a great question, and yes, absolutely. So I'm going to say 2 different kind of approaches for that. I mean, one, if this is a person that you have even casual conversations with, VAR can absolutely play a role. You can, VAR is a tool that you can use very casually. It can be something that comes in even just with, hey, how's it going? How are you doing? And one way that we can support each other in deepening the types of conversations we're having is to kind of push back. There tends to be a sort of automatic or even like rote, like, oh, I'm fine. We all say that, like, how are you doing? I'm fine. Or I'm good, whatever. um if we can kind of pause and like, yeah, it seems like something's going on. Is there, how are you really? And then they can say, yeah, I'm struggling, or I'm having a hard time, if they want to. But it's so powerful to demonstrate that you are there to hear, about the deeper level. You actually, care about what it is that they're actually going through right there. So in terms of approaching a person that you may not know well, or maybe it's like a work acquaintance or something, whatever feels comfortable with to you. Is it a text message? Is it, is it a G chat or a Slack chat or whatever chat forum that you use? Is it a casual conversation with a neighbor? You can say, hey, is there anything? Get to like, I'm glad that you shared. Is there anything that I can do to be helpful? I hope that you know that that I'm here for you. And that brings us to, I want to put this a couple websites in the chat here, but if you want to learn more about this or share with people around you, you can go to activeminds.org/VAR is one website to know about. And another one is activeminds.org/here for you. And that's our May is Mental Health Month campaign. So it's just you can hop on there and take a mental health pledge. It just says, or a here for you pledge. It says that I'm going to actively listen. I'm going to show up. You can get a free sticker if you want, that you can put on your office door that says, I've done this workshop, and I'm here for you. That's my pledge. Is really, really powerful. And so any of these things can demonstrate to somebody that you are present for them. How does one apply VAR being mindful of identity, culture, and intersectionality? I'm so glad that you asked. So I mentioned at the top that mental health conversations are very different in different communities and in different contexts. The conversation about mental health is different in South Dakota than where I'm based in California, and it's different here than it is there. It's different all over the place. And so thinking about identity, culture, and intersectionality, which if you haven't heard that term, intersectionality is a term coined by a professor at Columbia University named Kimberly Crenshaw, and it refers to the notion that we all have intersecting identities. So we all have a racial background. We all have a socioeconomic status. We all have a gender identity, a sexual orientation. We all, so there are many, many facets of my experiences and my perspectives that are intersecting. So when we talk about VAR being mindful of identity, culture, and intersectionality, I think one really critical component there is that validation. It says, and I think we're seeing that be so critical kind of now more than ever when we're thinking about racial identities, with racial uprisings happening across the country. We have to start by validating. I don't know what it means. I don't know what the personal experience of growing up with Black skin in this country is, and I can't say that I relate to that in any way. So starting with validation. What you're experiencing is real and it's valid, and I'm so glad that you shared. So I think that in my mind, VAR is incredibly powerful when we think about intersectionality and identity and culture, because it's in every way deferring to your experience and your truth and your reality, and saying it's real. And no matter the level that I'm able to relate with it. And so then we can listen and we can hear each other, appreciating and honoring the unique intersecting identities that each person brings to the table. So I appreciate that question. I'm just skimming through a few more questions here, and I apologize if I'm not able to get to all the questions, but there's some really great ones. If you fear showing you are struggling. Yes. Okay. So we've got a question. What if you fear showing you are struggling because you worry that it might affect how people look at you in the workplace, or risk losing your job because of your mental health? So I think that's really, really important and valuable to bring up in this context. I think there is a lot of fear as, what if I'm, really overwhelmed with work right now, and maybe not performing at my best. And I'm scared to say anything about it, because what if somebody thinks less of me, or that gets kind of penalized in a professional setting. So I just want to, like, kind of turn it around and validate that makes sense, that you might experience that, and that you might fear that, let's say. And I want to invite everybody to, in every capacity, every hat that you wear, be it somebody who's trying to communicate with a supervisor, or somebody who's trying to communicate with somebody that they supervise. Let's try to deepen those conversations. And I really lean on the folks who are supervisors, because I think that's it's so important and powerful to demonstrate that it's okay to share that maybe I'm having an anxious day, or maybe I need a personal health day. One thing we talk about in Active Minds is, let's say, like, a lot of us have paid time off benefits and sick time benefits. So, I can take a day off if I have a cold, and, and my physical wellness is not up to snuff, and so I need to stay home. I often wonder, and I challenge teams to think about that, instead of as a sick day, what if we thought about it as a personal health day, so that we can be encompassing of mental health. Because I think it can be easy, and I say, even as a mental health professional, it can be easy to take time off. It can be easy to take time off because I'm experiencing a cold, or like I have a headache or something, but harder to take time off if I'm feeling anxious, right? Because I have my own internal stigma around that. So I think it can be really important to elevate the conversation across the board, to really support each other in thinking more broadly about that. And again, if you fear repercussions, then I encourage you to engage with your benefits, with your EAP. Hopefully your EAP has resources that will help you navigate the conversation, so that you can get the support that you need. And Natasha, if you have anything to add there, I invite you to. But yeah, I think it's very important and valuable to seek that out when you're struggling. Okay. I'm reading that the sticker link didn't accept addresses. I will talk to my comms team about that. I appreciate that feedback on the Here For You website, and get that fixed. So please, I'll ping them right after we're done with this, and hopefully get that fixed. So go back to the Here For You website if you do want one of those stickers. So, just recognizing that we have about 5 minutes left, I want to kind of close on an uplifting note, and invite you all to share something in the chat that you do for self-care, be that professionally or personally. Is it in your office? You maybe will block off a couple hours to like focus on work and not answer emails? Or is it personally, you know, something that you do physically? And I just love reading that from everybody so that you can see what your colleagues do. So we're seeing exercise, planting, physical outside, writing, listening to podcasts, massage, meditation, music, sitting outside, audiobooks, gardening, sunshine, grandkids, crafting, paint by number, reading, hot baths, travel, go for a walk, quilting, puzzles, baking, praying, Zen garden. So call a friend. So I really encourage, you know, keep them coming. Check out what your colleagues are doing in the world of self-care. I invite you all to take a few minutes today to try and engage with something in self-care. I think it can be it can be challenging kind of in the best of times to prioritize our self-care, and now in kind of an unprecedented challenging time, it's extra hard to prioritize our self-care. So I invite you all to engage with that, and a note that self-care is, I love this, lock the phone away, watch HGTV, absolutely, taekwondo, basketball, spa nights. So self-care is all of these things. It's anything that's kind of an intentional supporting yourself in feeling better and relaxing and de-stressing, and it can be as small as 5 minutes a day, or you know, or it can be bigger events, you know. And a really important goal with self-care is making it consistent, and you know, really aiming for your full night of sleep, aiming for enough water every day, aiming for food that nurtures your body, physical movement in whatever way is possible and accessible and feels good to you. And all of these things, coloring, finding a quiet space. I love, we got a lot of coloring, Hallmark movies, absolutely, whatever is right for you. So so I want to thank everybody for being here, and I'll stick around for a few minutes if anyone's got questions for me after we close out. But I just really appreciate you taking the time to join in the conversation, and I'll make a note to get that link fixed for the addresses so that you can get your stickers if you want them. So so thank you all. Feel free to connect with Active Minds. And yeah, and you've got my email address if you would like
Thank
if
you,
you have any
Becky.
questions. Yeah.
I don't know if you were able to get a screenshot, or if you still can, of the word cloud, but there were some people that were asking for that. So if it's possible. So thank you for the great presentation. So much great information. We really, really appreciate you sharing all of that with us today. And thank you everyone for joining us. A reminder that you can join us for the Training Tuesdays every month, held the third Tuesday of the month at usually around 10 a.m. Central Time. May's Training Tuesday will be a follow-up to this session, focusing on stress management. We invite all state employees to join us as we learn how to better handle our day-to-day stresses. To register for Training Tuesdays or any other BHR trainings, please visit the BHR website. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
All right, I'll stick around for a second. I got a question. What does the she, her in my name me and why do I have that? And I think that's a great question. I appreciate that. It's an indication that I use she, her pronouns, and at Active Minds, and we just, it's really important not to assume somebody's gender identity and the pronouns that they may use. So we interact with people who use they, them pronouns, or he, him pronouns. It's respecting folks who may be trans identifying or non-binary. So just a way of not assuming what someone's pronouns are based on kind of what we think. Got a question about my email address, just becky@activeminds.org. I'll type that into chat here. All right, Natasha, think we're good to close up, or do you want to stay around for a second?
I think we're good. I think everything